Thank you for tuning in to Love in Your Hands with Cynthia Clark, soulmate palmist, spiritual teacher, love coach, author, and speaker. We're sharing stories of love and connection and lessons learned along the way. This podcast is sponsored by loveinyourhands.com, the place to ignite soulmate love fast using an innovative system to help you end loneliness and toxic relationships and elevate your vibrational energy to soulmate love and deeply compatible partners. Get started for free at loveinyourhands.com. And now here's your host, Cynthia Clark. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Cynthia Clark, and I am your quantum palmist and love and ascension coach. So if you are interested in bringing more love into your life, I love talking about love, and today is no exception. Today, I actually want to talk about some of the mistakes that people make, and we're going to look at it from a different perspective. We're actually going to look at it from the perspective of the hands and the hand shape. So, what you may not realize is that your hand shape forms by the time you are about 6 years old. Okay, so from the time you're a little baby until you're about 6 years old, you're completely in your subconscious mind. You are just absorbing all kinds of information. And we all start out with little earthy hands. So our fingers are kind of short and we've got pretty square, broad palms. And that's because we need that type of hand shape in order to gather up all of the physical information, because we're in a new body, right? We're a little baby. We're in a new physical environment. And so in order to absorb all of that information, we need that hand to be earthy. But by the time we turn about 6 years old, we start to develop our higher states of awareness and consciousness, and our hand shape actually changes, and you can think of it as sort of gelling or setting by that time. And when this happens, we will have our personality emerge, and we're going to have ideas about the world that will actually impact us for the rest of our lives. So, when it comes to love, we will have certain tendencies based upon our hand shape. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about the 4 basic hand shapes today and the types of mistakes that each one can make in the realm of love and relationships. Okay, so by the way, this doesn't just apply to romantic relationships. This could also apply to friendships. This could apply to acquaintances. This could just apply to any type of relationship. So it's actually really important for you to understand your hand shape so that you can make better decisions in maybe your reactions and how you respond to people and things like that. So since we were just starting talking about the earth hand, let's go ahead and talk about the earth hand first. Okay, so here is an example of the earth hand. So short fingers and a broad palm. Okay, this is what an earth hand looks like. So for those of you who are going to just be listening to the podcast, just take a look at your own hands, see if your fingers are long or short, and if you have a kind of a broad palm or if you have more of a rectangular palm. That's how we determine our hand shape. So an earth hand is short fingers and a square palm. And an earth hand also tends to be quite thick. So that's another indicator for an earthy type person. Okay, so if you have an earth hand, you're going to be somebody who is a little bit more on the physical plane than other people. So you're going to be a busy doer type person. You're going to be more in the realm of what's practical. You're not really going to be diving into emotional stuff. And earth people are also quite independent. So they tend to be the ones who don't ask for other people's opinions. So in a relationship, they might actually just try to do everything on their own, which I would say could be a mistake, because sometimes you have to rely on other people, or other people want to be included, right? They want to be included in what you're doing. But earthy types tend to be the ones who are just like, no, 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 I'm going to do it on my own. And so there's a tendency for them to maybe not trust other people. And they also can just be just not in touch with their own emotional realm, because they are so physical. So they may not even think about how they're feeling. They may not even think about how other people are feeling as well. So sometimes they can be somewhat blunt, and they can come across as a little bit rude. This may or may not be intentional, by the way. They may do it on purpose, but more for what I would recommend for an earth person is to just, if you're an earth person, just be really aware of, am I being overly blunt, or am I not being overly blunt? And can I include other people? Can I collaborate a little bit more? How can I do that? So that's what I would recommend for the earth hand person. Okay, so let's move on to the next hand shape, which is fire. Okay, so fire hands are going to be short fingers, just like those earth hands, but the palm is going to be much longer. So we have a rectangular palm as opposed to a square palm. And fire types are the passionate types. This happens to be my hand shape. I've got fire hands, and I definitely am a passionate person. Now, this can be good and bad, of course. In a relationship, I can fall in love really quickly. I can also fall out of love quickly if I'm not with the right person. And I can also be pretty judgmental. So sometimes fire types, they overreact. It just comes up and out, and they just can't help themselves. So they have to be careful about that. Sometimes they can offend other people and not really mean to, because they just don't think about it. It just comes up, right? It just comes up and out. So fire types, they need to be aware of their mouth, and they need to make sure that they don't put their foot in it. They also need to be aware that, hey, maybe I should slow down in my reaction to something, and maybe I should think about it a little bit longer. So this way they can avoid making mistakes that they'll turn around and regret later. So I would recommend for fire people to make sure that you have some trustworthy people in your corner who think a lot like you do and can actually understand you, so that you can make good decisions as you go through your life. And that's why I rely on my husband so much, because he always can give me another perspective. He can help me to just be more thoughtful about what I'm doing, and he can slow me down, because fire is very quick moving, and they tend to be just overexcited sometimes. Okay, so that's the fire person. Okay, so let's take a look at the next hand shape, which is water. Okay, so a water hand is somebody who has long fingers and a rectangular palm. So like fire, we have the same palm shape, but unlike the earth and the fire, we have much longer fingers. The fingers tend to be nearly as long as the palm. So you can think of a water hand as just the very narrow palm, and just narrow and long. Okay, so water types are the most emotional. They work in the realm of emotions. So they tend to be the empaths, and they're also the most adaptable in relationships, which of course is good and bad. On the good side, they can modify their own responses and reactions in order to fit into the situation that they need to fit into. So they're sort of like chameleons when it comes to relationships. But they can also be quite wishy-washy because they actually don't necessarily know what their own feelings are about something. So, for example, if you ask a water person, well, how do you feel about this? They're going to actually absorb that information from you, and they're going to try and respond based upon how you feel about it. So this can be a challenge for water types to actually be in touch with their own feelings and have an opinion strong enough to express it. Okay, so if you're a water person, I would recommend that you check in with your own feelings throughout the day and ask yourself, how do I want to be feeling? So instead of, a lot of times they can take on the weight of the world, those water types, because again, that empathy gift is just so natural for them, which can bring them down, and they can start to fall into some negative patterns if they're not careful. So we want to make sure that the water types have the ability to express themselves emotionally, but without being attached to it one way or another. So we got to take away the judgment of that tied in with that emotion. Okay, so water types also do very well when they're not rushed. Okay, because the long fingers brings in more of a slow energy. So in terms of relationships, they're much better off if they can take their time to think about something. Don't push them too quickly into making a decision, and then they do much better. It doesn't mean they can't make a decision quickly. They absolutely can, because of course they're adaptable, but they do better and they make better decisions if they have time to actually go over their own feelings about it and then come to the conclusions that they need to come to. So that's what I recommend for water. Okay, so then let's take a look at the last hand shape, which is air. Okay, so air is going to have long fingers and a square palm. And so this hand shape, this is my husband's hand shape, by the way, very compatible with fire. And by the way, water is very compatible with earth. So in terms of who do you resonate with, or who do you get along the best with, the fire hands and the air hands get along very well, and the water hands and the earth hands get along very well normally, because that's the resonant match. So air hands tend to be the thinkers, the evaluators, the ponderers. They're the ones who are stuck in their head. They're constantly analyzing everything. And so a common love mistake that they make is they overanalyze everything. So in other words, they'll have a conversation with somebody and they will go back over that conversation after it's over, and they may run it over in their head probably 10 or 15 times. And they'll think about how they could have or should have done something different or better. They tend to be the ones who beat themselves up the most when it comes to conversations and things like that. So they need to be really careful not to over analyze every little thing and not take it personally. So they do tend to be, in terms of relationships, they can be very romantic, but again, it's almost to the point where they can overdo things, and they can push things on other people who aren't necessarily ready for what they have to share. However, on the positive side, the air people are very open-minded. They tend to be, even though they can be very critical of themselves, they tend to be open to different facts and situations, and that makes them quite refreshing to be around. If you want to learn something new, stick around an air person for a little while, and you might just get some new ideas. They tend to be good at pointing things out to you that you might not have seen or realized about yourself as well. So, but they do tend to be just sort of that stuck in their head kind of mode. All right, so what do I recommend for air people? I recommend that they find ways to decompress all of that mental energy. One of the best ways to do that is actually to focus on breathing exercises. This is where meditation comes in so wonderfully, and just tapping into that beautiful breath of life, right? We want to breathe in that positive energy, and we want to exhale out worry and stress. You know, the air types more than any other tend to be the worriers of the world. So they need to find a way to let that go. Exercise can be another really great way for them to do that, or doing it through journaling. A lot of air people, because they're so mental, they do very well with their writing. And so if they can write out what they're frustrated about, or if they can write out their thoughts and get it organized, they do very well. So that is what I would recommend for the air people. So if you happen to be somebody who is looking for love, or even if you just want to know more about yourself, your hands really do hold the keys to everything about you. My mission is to help you love your life, find love, love yourself, all the aspects of love that we can tie into. That's really what this is all about. It's about being better in yourself so that you can have better relationships, so that you can be more positive. You can learn to use the wisdom that is in your hands and use it in a positive way to be more fulfilled and happy in your life. So just go to loveinyourhands.com if you're interested in learning more. And I want to thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure as always. And if you would like to be a guest on my podcast, you can also submit to be a guest. I do readings periodically on the show, and you can just go to loveinyourhands.com/podcast to be considered. So if you have questions about your own hands that you might want me to analyze, it would be fun to have you on the show. So remember to live life with love, and have a beautiful day, everybody. Thank you for listening to Love in Your Hands. Please rate, review, and subscribe to show your support. This podcast is sponsored by loveinyourhands.com, the place to find the secret ingredients to your soulmate. Start your free Soulmate Connection membership today using the most innovative and accurate algorithm to match you to potential long-lasting love, all at loveinyourhands.com.